Selene Saxby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the member for Brighton Kemp Town and my right honourable friend the member for Dover for securing this important debate. Apparently I have mentioned this in the House before, but North Devon has a housing crisis. The enormous growth in short-term holiday lets and second homes has resulted in an unsustainable shortage of houses for local residents to live in. It's now at such a stage that many businesses and public services are simply unable to recruit, and we have numerous businesses that are actually able to operate full-time. So whereas many will say, well, don't you welcome your tourists? Indeed, we do welcome our tourists, Madam Deputy Speaker, but we would like them also to eat in our local pubs and restaurants, which at the moment are unable to open full-time because they can't get any staff because there's nowhere for anyone to live. So the private long-term rental sector across Devon has declined by more than 50% in the last 2 years, and over 60% in my own North Devon constituency. Unfortunately, government policy has not helped. The changes to landlord tax relief made it preferential to have a short-term furnished holiday let rather than a long-term rental tenancy. Although these changes were introduced back in 2017, they actually only became fully effective during 2020, where most of us were rather consumed with the pandemic. And obviously this change came into effect at the same time as people suddenly were desperate to escape to wide open spaces such as my beautiful constituency. As well as soon as we were allowed to go on holiday, people rushed to come and the prices paid for holiday lets soared. This is alongside the new legislation we passed only last week to raise stamp duty thresholds, which still applies to second homes and holiday lets. This one's more complicated because we so desperately need more people to become long-term landlords again. We've seen such a demise, we need to find a way to reverse that. And I recognise some of the challenges in this area, but I very much hope as we move forward we will be able to actually really consider how some of the policies designed to help people get on the property ladder actually are just facilitating more people to buy a second home or particularly a short-term holiday let that sits empty for half the year. The ongoing delay with the DCMS consultation on a registration scheme for second homes or short-term holiday lets is now complete, but we still have no date for when the results will be released, which means that councils have very few tools available to them to tackle the surge in properties that lie empty for months of the year, yet are still more profitable to their landlords than a long-term rental. We need to ensure there are changes to use clauses to properties that are made into holiday lets. These properties were built as homes and should be lived in. If they're a business, they should have to have a change of use and be taxed accordingly. This is made even harder by the increased requirements on landlords with regards to their energy performance certificates, with rural and coastal properties requiring huge amounts of investment to achieve the necessary ratings. This is resulting in even more rental properties being sold or converted to the less regulated short-term holiday lets market. So whilst warmly welcoming the need to actually ensure our properties don't leak, I think we also need to recognise that rural housing stock is indeed very different to urban housing stock, and we need to find other more creative ways to tackle this so that landlords don't take what is a very logical step out by selling or moving on to a different type of tenancy. Swathes of long-term tenants in my constituency have found themselves evicted under Section 21s, so that landlords could take advantage of the tax breaks available to them with their property being let out as a short-term holiday let. Not to mention that post-pandemic, long-term rentals may be maybe £800 in my patch for a small two-bed, whereas on a short-term holiday let, you'll pay at least that per week, probably double. So the lack of rental properties in my patch is resulting in when people are evicted, there's simply nowhere to go. The council housing list is so long, people are actually being rehomed as far away as Bristol, and if they are staying in the area for children's schooling, we now have multiple families being bused, or usually a private taxi, 10 to 15 miles each morning to get to their primary school at a time when we know that council resources are under pressure. We're just adding layer upon layer of extra costs into these systems simply because we don't have enough homes for people to live in. And whilst for tenants, Section 21s have indeed been horrific, all of us, I'm sure here today, have awful stories of what's gone on. Not all landlords are bad. And many find themselves struggling to evict people who haven't paid rent, for example, and notices are taking up to 18 months to get through the courts in my constituency. And I really hope that as we hopefully see some progress in this area, that landlords are not demonised, because indeed we need more landlords to come forward to enable to tackle this section of the market, because it is indeed that relationship between landlord and tenant that actually drives a successful rental relationship. I know we feel it's unbalanced at present, but it is that relationship, and I really do hope that we are able to actually support both sides of this very delicate balance. We need to find that way to give security to tenants, but also the ability to landlords to evict when they genuinely need to. And the concern is that with some of the proposed legislation, we're already seeing landlords choosing that they don't want to risk not being able to evict a tenant. So again, particularly where you can have a short-term holiday let in my patch, why would you have a long-term rental? So for me, we just need the housing stock we have to be better utilised and not sat empty for half of the year. But I'm not going to disagree that we do need to build more homes. Over 16,000 are currently on Devon's housing lists, and even if those lists were closed now, at the current rate of building, it will take over 32 years to clear the backlog. We need urgent intervention into the housing market in Devon and many other places around the coast. The demise of long-term rentals makes moving to remote, rural and coastal locations to work nearby impossible, and we have so many job vacancies that many companies are simply not operating at full capacity. If we want economic growth, we need workers to do that, who can live close to their place of work and find and afford the accommodation. And for communities to thrive, they need people living there all year round, not the winter ghost towns that blight far too many of our popular tourist destinations. We warmly welcome tourists, but the balance between visitors and workers is now not there, and urgent intervention is needed. MPs in seats like mine have been raising these issues for years with multiple ministers. And I very much hope the Minister will remain in post long enough to deliver some substantive change to find a way to reverse the demise of the long-term rental sector.